Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive, especially for you. Today we're going deep, really deep, into the world of psychopathy. We've all seen the movies, the chilling portrayals, but we wanted to get real, beyond the Hollywood facade and really unpack this complex, often misunderstood condition. And we're doing it all thanks to you using that fascinating Wikipedia article you sent our way.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Psychopathy, it really seems to have this hold on us, this fascination. Maybe it's that fear of the unknown, the human mind, or maybe it's just questioning, like, what makes someone tick?
Totally. And that Wikipedia article, it really lays it all out there. It defines psychopathy as this personality construct, this blend of traits like impaired empathy, lack of remorse, a bit of boldness thrown in, some disinhibition, and a whole lot of egocentrism. Not exactly someone you'd want to grab coffee with, right?
Right, and to make it even trickier, they're often good at hiding it. Like they put on this mask, this convincing act to blend in.
It's true. It's like that term, the mask of sanity,
Yeah.
right? They can seem so normal until they're not. It really makes you wonder about who you can trust. There's this quote by Robert Hare. He calls them social predators in his book, Snakes in Suits. And it's chilling, Like, are they lurking among us? You start to question everyone.
Well, hold on a sec, because it's important to remember our understanding of psychopathy. It changed a lot over time.
Mm-hmm.
Early definitions were so broad, kind of a catch-all term. But thanks to researchers like Cleckley, who you mentioned, and Hare, we've got a clearer picture now. We can separate it from things like psychosis, which often gets mixed up with psychopathy, especially in movies and stuff.
Yeah, we're not just talking about someone who's a little different, right? We're talking about specific traits,
Right.
specific patterns. And what about that whole psychopath versus sociopath thing? That's always fascinated me.
It's a crucial distinction, and it brings up this idea of nurture versus nature, right? Some experts prefer sociopath because it points to the role of social factors, like maybe they weren't born with these traits, but life experiences shaped them, you know, trauma, upbringing, all that.
It's that age-old debate. Are we born this way or do we become this way? So let's dig deeper into those specific psychopathic traits the Wikipedia article talks about. It breaks it down into this three-factor model: arrogant and deceitful interpersonal style, deficient affective experience, and an impulsive and irresponsible lifestyle. That's quite a combination.
It is, and it often plays out as this, well, think charming on the surface, but underneath there's a real lack of empathy. Master manipulators, some might say. They can read you, exploit your emotions, and walk away without a shred of guilt.
So we're talking someone magnetic, maybe even captivating, but incapable of truly caring. It's a strange mix of intrigue and, honestly, a little terrifying. But here's where it gets even more complex. The article suggests that some of these seemingly negative traits, they might actually be advantageous in certain environments.
Now that's where things get interesting. Studies are showing that certain psychopathic traits, especially things like boldness, not being easily rattled, and a lower capacity for empathy, they can actually be, well, helpful in certain cutthroat settings. Like think high stakes, competitive fields.
Wait, are you saying some of the things that make a psychopath potentially dangerous could also be their ticket to success? That seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does seem a bit backward, doesn't it? But think about it. Someone who's not crippled by self-doubt, who doesn't really stress the small stuff, who's cool under pressure. In certain high-pressure jobs, those could almost be seen as strengths, couldn't they?
I guess so, yeah. They're kind of tailor-made for those chaotic corporate environments where it's all about the bottom line.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Take negotiations, for example. Imagine someone who can stay laser-focused on their goals, who doesn't get bogged down by emotions. They might thrive in those situations.
So it's not that all CEOs are secretly psychopaths, right?
Of course not, no. It's way more complicated than that. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. It's like if certain personality types can flourish, even with a lack of empathy in these systems, what does that say about those systems? It's a bit of a rabbit hole, isn't it?
It really is. And speaking of rabbit holes, the Wikipedia article, it dives into this whole neurological side of psychopathy. It talks about the amygdala. That's the part of the brain that processes fear and emotions, right?
Yeah, like our internal alarm system telling us when to be afraid or cautious.
Right. And studies are showing that in psychopathic individuals, their amygdala, it's often smaller and less reactive.
Yeah.
It doesn't fire as much.
So they don't experience fear or guilt in the same way. It's like their alarm bell is broken.
That's a good way to put it. And it kind of throws fuel on that nature versus nurture debate, doesn't it?
Oh, so?
Well, you've got this clear biological factor, a difference in brain structure, but then you have to consider the impact of environment, right? Early childhood experiences, things like trauma or severe neglect, those can actually affect brain development, especially in someone who's already predisposed.
It's like this double whammy, a recipe for, well, not the best outcome. But it still makes you wonder if someone with those predispositions had a different upbringing, a more nurturing environment, would they still end up the same?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's so hard to tell. And that's what makes psychopathy so complex. It's not black and white. It's not good versus evil like in the movies.
Speaking of movies, can we talk about the link between psychopathy and crime? Because let's be honest, when most people hear psychopath, they think Hannibal Lecter, right?
It's true. There's this strong association, and for good reason. The article even mentions it. Like, up to a quarter of the prison population might meet the criteria for psychopathy. Way higher than in the general population.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Just because there's a connection doesn't mean it's a one-to-one. Not all psychopaths are criminals, and not all criminals are psychopaths.
So it's more nuanced than that. It's not necessarily a predisposition to violence, but this lack of empathy and remorse that can manifest in different ways depending on the person and their circumstances. Like those successful psychopaths the article mentions.
Right. They might be functioning just fine, holding down jobs, maybe even in relationships. But their lack of empathy, it still leaves a mark. Broken hearts, strained relationships, a trail of emotional damage in their wake.
It's a good reminder that psychopathy exists on a spectrum, and it's far more common than we might realize. But if it's not always as dramatic as the movies portray it, how do we even begin to address it? Is treatment even possible? It's the big question, right? Can we actually change someone who's wired this way? The Wikipedia article, it talks about treatment, but it seems kind of, pessimistic.
Yeah, it's true. There's no magic bullet here. The idea of completely erasing these traits, it's pretty unlikely with what we know now. But that doesn't mean we just give up, right? It's more about shifting our approach. Instead of trying to cure psychopathy, it's more about management.
So harm reduction, like giving them tools to navigate the world without, leaving a trail of destruction.
Exactly. And it's tricky because those traditional therapies, the ones that focus on empathy, they often don't work so well.
Because they can't really engage with it.
Right. It's like they don't have the same wiring. Some even say that trying to instill guilt or remorse, it can backfire. It just becomes another thing to manipulate.
So where do you even start?
Well, there are some promising approaches, things that focus on self-interest reward systems, like highlighting the benefits of, say, cooperating, being honest, appealing to their own self-interest instead of trying to create something that's not really there.
So instead of saying this is wrong, it's more like if you do this, you'll get this. Like training, almost.
It's a simple way to put it, but yeah, there are some parallels. We're talking about rewiring their decision-making, not giving them a whole new personality.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered in just this one deep dive. Psychopathy, it's way more complex than it seems on the surface. Makes you think if some of these traits can be, helpful in certain situations, does that challenge how we see them? Where do we draw the line between, a personality quirk and a real disorder?
It's the big question, isn't it? And it's one we all have to grapple with. Because maybe, just maybe, it's not just about understanding psychopathy, but understanding ourselves and the world we've built around it. And on that note, we'll leave you with that to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been fascinating.